In 1956, American television made a choice it had never made before. The cameras were aimed at a 21-year-old singer, and then they refused to show him below the waist. Not for a war, not for a crime, for the way a young man moved when he sang. So what was the country really so afraid of? Here is the strange part. The man they feared was not a rebel by design. He was a shy truck driver who called strangers sir and ma'am. He never wrote a song. He never learned to read a single note of music. Yet within 2 years, he rewired what a nation heard. To understand how, we have to leave that studio behind. Elvis Aaron Presley was born in Tupelo, Mississippi in 1935. He arrived carrying a loss the cameras never saw. His twin brother Jesse was stillborn minutes before him. Elvis grew up an only child in a poor family. They had almost nothing, moving between small rented rooms. Music was the one thing that cost them nothing. The story goes that he wanted a rifle for his birthday. He was handed a cheap guitar instead. At school, he was painfully shy and easy to overlook. He carried that guitar to class, and other kids mocked it. When he was 10, he sang at the Tupelo Fair. He walked away with a small prize and a strange certainty. Nobody watching guessed what that quiet boy would become. In church, he watched singers lose themselves in the sound. He never forgot how that abandon made a whole room feel. When he was 13, the Presleys moved to Memphis. And Memphis is where the real story begins. Picture America in 1954. The Supreme Court had just struck down school segregation on paper, but the radio dial was still strictly divided. Country stations for white listeners, race records for black ones. I Love Lucy ruled the glowing new television sets. The Cold War hummed quietly under everything, and a teenager in Memphis refused to hear the line everyone else did. On Beale Street, he soaked up gospel and the blues. He even shopped for clothes on its flashiest blocks. He dressed like the future before anyone else could see it. On the radio, he loved country and bluegrass. In his head, none of it belonged to separate worlds. By day, he drove a truck for an electric company. He earned barely more than $1 an hour. In the summer of 1954, he walked into Sun Records. A producer named Sam Phillips pressed record. Out came a song called That's All Right. The B-side flipped a sleepy bluegrass waltz into something restless. It was country and blues fused into one new sound. Local radio played it on repeat, and the phones lit up. Soon the world would have a name for it. Rock and roll. Sam Phillips had been chasing one idea for years. Find a voice that could carry black music to white America. In Elvis, he finally heard it. But the road did not run straight. His first big country showcase fell completely flat. The polite verdict was that he should not come back. A year later, those same rooms could not hold his crowds. A manager called Colonel Tom Parker heard something else. He heard money. In late 1955, RCA bought Elvis's contract for $35,000. It was a record sum for an almost unknown singer. Early in 1956, Heartbreak Hotel became his first national #1. Teenagers bought his records faster than stores could stock them. Parents, preachers, and newspapers called him a threat, and that only made the teenagers want him more. Before Sullivan, other shows tried to tame him. One host put Elvis in a tuxedo and tails, then made him sing Hound Dog to an actual basset hound. It was designed to make him look ridiculous. Instead, fans flooded the network with furious letters. That summer, Hound Dog and Don't Be Cruel topped the charts together. By that autumn, Elvis was everywhere. On September 9th, he stepped onto the Ed Sullivan Show. Around 60 million people watched him. That was more than 80% of everyone with a television. You already know what happened next. The hips, the screaming, the waist-up cameras. But almost nobody remembers a stranger detail. Ed Sullivan was not even in his chair that first night. He was recovering from a serious car crash. And the man filling in had once dismissed Elvis completely. Now he introduced him to the largest audience in the country. In some towns, radio hosts snapped his records on the air. Officials called his movements a danger to the young. None of it slowed the records, leaving the shelves. By his third appearance in 1957, the order came down. Film him only from the waist up. But television was not really censoring a dance. It was deciding how much change it could show at once. Then, at the very peak, the machine simply stopped. In 1958, the biggest star in the world was drafted. Everyone assumed the studios would quietly pull strings. They assumed he would be kept safe and on tour. Instead, Elvis did the exact opposite. He turned down every offer of special treatment. He served as an ordinary soldier in Cold War Germany. While he was overseas, his fame could have quietly faded. 2 years is a long time in a teenager's music world. Yet the day he came home, the crowds were still waiting. The rebel who scared parents returned a respectable young man. He had turned an interruption into a reinvention. It would not be the last time he did that. Across the 1960s, he made more than 30 films. The soundtracks kept selling, but the rebel had gone quiet. Then, in 1968, he took a real risk. His manager had wanted a simple Christmas television program. Elvis fought for something rawer, and he won. He walked onto the stage in black leather, stripped down, alone with his voice again. The special reminded the world exactly who he was. The next year, he returned to live performance in Las Vegas. His opening run shattered the city's attendance records. Suspicious Minds gave him one final #1. Then, in 1973, he aimed higher than anyone had before. On January 14th, he sang live from Hawaii. The concert was beamed around the planet by satellite. It reached more than 40 countries at once. Some estimates put the audience past 1 billion people. His eagle-studded jumpsuit became an icon all its own. He had turned a costume into a kind of flag. No solo performer had ever attempted anything like it. Elvis Presley died in 1977 at just 42. His death belongs in the story, but it is not the story. Because here is what actually endured. Elvis did not invent rock and roll. Black artists had built it long before he arrived. What he did was carry it across a line America had drawn. He became the bridge a divided radio dial could not stop. And here's a paradox few people expect. Elvis won 3 Grammy Awards in his lifetime. Every single one was for gospel music, not rock. The king of rock and roll treasured the hymns of his childhood. Artists from the Beatles to Bruce Springsteen traced a line back to him. He scored 18 #1 singles along the way. By most counts, he is still the best-selling solo artist in history. Every year, hundreds of thousands gather at his Memphis home, Graceland. It is the most visited private house in America after the White House. So look again at that night in 1956. A country pointed its cameras away from a dancing man. It was trying not to see what had already arrived. The question was never really about Elvis alone. It was about a nation meeting its own future. So who invented the king? Memphis or the music he carried across the line? If stories like this one stay with you, subscribe. There is always another voice behind the sound.